Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Luan, and I will be presenting to you this afternoon. I am from Cape Town, South Africa, and it would be great to see where you are today. So please say hi in the chat. I always love getting your messages and tell us where you are. So type your name, type your location so that we can see who we're talking to today. So a little bit about me while we wait for those names to come in. Um, I've been a teacher for over 13 long years. I've loved every second of it. I cannot complain. I'm also a teacher trainer and tutor trainer for the TEFL Academy. As mentioned, an English teacher, a Cambridge examiner. So I'm busy, but I'm never ever bored. So today's webinar is a really interesting one, as usual. And we will be answering all your questions at the end of the presentation. So please do hold on to them. Until then, when I open up Q&A, you're more than welcome to type in your questions, but hold on to them for now because I don't want to miss any of them while I'm presenting. We will be answering questions specifically related to today's webinar. Only today's topic will be covered in today's webinar, but as usual, if you have any other questions relating to any of our other TEFL topics, of course you can send a ticket to tutor support where we're waiting to answer all your questions. All right, so let's say hello to who we've got here today. Oh, I love this. The messages have just flooded in. So we've got Carol. Hello, Carol from Jamaica. It's lovely to see you. And then we've got Megan from England. Hello to you. We have Adri, and Adri is from Montague in South Africa. And we have um, Tipsy Teletubby from Russia. Very nice to have you here with us. And we have Juanita from windy Cape Town. I know Juanita. And then we have Nikki, and Nikki is from England. Hello. We have Ruby from Southern California. Hello to you, Ruby. And Eric from Toronto in Canada. We have Kim from Johannesburg, South Africa. Matthew from St. Lucia. Edgar from East London, South Africa. We have Color of Art from Durban. And then let's see. We've also got Mike from Iran. Hello to you. Chandra from Cape Town. Graham from Edinburgh. The names are all coming in. You're also welcome. It's lovely to have you all here. And it's always so interesting for us tutors to see that we're literally speaking to people from all around the world. That is the nature of our business. TEFL, teaching, get used to it. You'll be speaking to people from all over the world once you start teaching too. So let's get straight into today's webinar. As mentioned, we've got quite a lot to cover, and it's a very, very interesting topic. So I can't wait to get started with you. So I think by now you've gathered that the topic is business English. And in today's webinar, we'll be discussing quite a bit. We'll be looking at what business English is, a basic definition. We're looking at who our students are, who wants to learn business English. We're going to briefly introduce who can teach business English and also what business English entails, a little bit more detail, just for you to understand what sort of content you're going to be working with as a business English teacher. And then also a few tips on how to get started, how to create that effective work scheme, tips for effective business English lesson planning, the advantages and also the challenges of teaching business English, the career opportunities that are involved in business English, and also where to find resources and also more about our own business English course, because yes, of course, being the TEFL Academy, we also offer a business English course that you can absolutely explore in addition to your existing TEFL course. All right, so why not get started and let's look at the definition of business English. What is business English? Because I think it intimidates a lot of us. A lot of us tend to think, well, I don't have a business background, so is this for me? What is business English? What does it entail? Well, business English is part of what is known as English for specific purposes. In other words, it is specifically designed to meet the very specific needs of the learner. You'll hear that word specific come through a lot because, of course, this is in contrast to a general English class. So it was designed for professionals who need to communicate in English in the workplace, where general English focuses more on practical and functional English, which can be used in everyday English settings. Business English looks more at the specific English style used in business settings. So it's interesting, not only for you as a teacher, but for your students too. All right, so I think a lot of you are wondering, well, who will I be teaching? Who will I have in my business English class? So, business English students are generally those who conduct or would like to conduct business with English speaking companies or who use English as a shared language with companies outside the Anglosphere. So many job seekers are also interested in learning business English. In general, the focus is much less on grammar, but rather more on specific skills, language, and vocabulary. So I think you'll hear that word specific pop up so many times today because this is in contrast, of course, with a general English context. So business English is not necessarily for business people conducting business within English speaking countries. It can also be used as a franca, which is the common language between countries where different languages are spoken, for example, France and China. This is because English has already been established or established itself as the language of international business and technology. So, honing business English skills is also popular with students and job seekers around the world. So, also, you have elements like globalization and technology. These are also two reasons. There is a demand for business English and an increasing demand for business English. So business has become increasingly international, and technology has really allowed us to communicate at faster speeds. Many typically international fields have a particularly high need for specialized business English training, and these include finance, law, engineering, medicine, hospitality, aviation, IT, so many different fields. And in each case, as a business English trainer, it's important that you keep in mind the specific, there it is again, specialized English language needs of your students. In terms of skills, language, and vocabulary, of course. Remember, for business English, this personalized, needs based approach to teaching is much more important than focusing on, say, grammar. So I think if you're imagining businessmen and women sitting in suits around a boardroom table, you're not totally wrong, but that is not the only scenario when it comes to teaching business English. Business English can be necessary for employees at all levels of business, from salespeople to managers to call center agents to CEOs. Students who take business English lessons might also do so in company during office hours or privately after hours. Companies can also sponsor their employees to take a sabbatical, specifically to learn English. And these students sometimes travel here or to an English speaking destination to do so or online. This just depends. And then you have university students who are doing a business degree. They can also take some extra lessons or one-on-one lessons with the tutor or tutors to help them through their studies. And this can be done at a university or at a private language school, or as mentioned earlier, of course, online. And I did a little bit of research as to the previous business English students of the TEFL Academy tutors and what they've included. We've had situations where our teachers have had to teach, for example, a CFO from a bank who studied one-to-one English lessons in South Africa for about 4 weeks. We've had other tutors who've had to teach call center agents living and working in the UK. Um, there was a group of Angolan engineers sent to South Africa for a year to have group lessons. Spanish commerce students taking extra lessons at their university while studying. A Polish security guard working in the UK who needed to learn how to write work reports. So, as you can see, even within this very specific field of business English, you have such a diverse group of students and so many different backgrounds and motivations to learn business English. So, as you can see, wide range of students, and your classroom could look just about like anything. So, I think prepare yourself. It's a very, very interesting, amazing, creative space, despite being business related all the time. All right, so let's move on to discuss who can teach business English. And the most important thing, of course, is that there are many different situations you could find yourself teaching in once you are a TEFL teacher. You might choose to teach English as a foreign language to a specific age group, for example, kindergarten or teens or adults. Or your school might ask you to teach a specific class on top of your usual classes. And here you might be asked to teach English for academic purposes or exam classes, for example. And while most of these classes are doable with a bit of research and preparation, there is one class that really gets people thinking and worrying a little bit. Even the most experienced TEFL teacher, and that is business English. A very common question we get asked is, can I teach business if I have no business experience? And the answer is, yes, you can. If you think about it, we often teach topics that we have no knowledge about as teachers. We teach about global warming, we teach about technology, we teach about medicine. I once taught an interior designer. I also taught a pilot, aviation English. I have been in a plane, I have flown to places, but I have never personally flown an aeroplane myself. So it just goes to show that as teachers, we teach various topics every single day, having very little knowledge about these as long as we know the English content. We don't usually question our ability to do these things. So, business English, though, seems so foreign and unknown that many teachers believe they can't teach it, even though they can. Now that you know, as a TEFL qualified teacher, that you can teach business English, let's have a deeper look at what business English entails. I think this will be so interesting for so many of you because business English has got a beautiful structure that once you know your work scheme and once you've designed your work scheme, your lessons kind of just flow from one to the next. Right, so as mentioned earlier, we're going to have a look at what business English entails. Right, so the very first thing to think about is that your business English class will depend entirely on your students. You may be teaching a group of accountants from Hong Kong, a CFO from France, the HR department of a German company, and each class has their own needs, and they might not be what you think. The usual topics for a business English class are giving presentations, writing emails to customers, chatting with foreign colleagues, talking to customers on the telephone, writing emails to international colleagues, effectively participating at an international conference, giving a presentation to potential customers, and then also engaging in small talk. Also, a few more aspects of business English, having a job interview at an English company, conducting interviews, negotiating a contract, understanding a contract, making suggestions for a project, debating topics at a meeting, how to participate in meetings, and also dealing politely with a customer complaint. Plus, depending on your students, your classes will include lessons on specific topics, maybe related to their specific career or field. So, specific terminology related to a particular business or aspect of business, paperwork particular to a job role, or communication skills. Surprisingly, you may be asked, sorry, not to teach anything business related, but focus more on the social communication side of things. Many business people need to communicate regularly with people from other countries. So using English as their language of communication. So they need to be able to have small talk or chat in a social setting, as well as communicate in a business context. And another aspect of business English is intercultural body language in meetings, how to understand it outside of your own cultural context. So, as you can see, yes, there's a lot. There's a lot you can teach. There's a lot that you can include in your own work scheme. And with that in mind, let's look at how we get started, how we start building an effective business syllabus. Because in some cases, you'll receive a course book. In some cases, you may have to write your own content. The latter is the more common scenario where you have to create the business course yourself. Right. So the very first thing when we think about getting started is to do a needs analysis. So this is to find out what students really want to achieve, um, and when they would need to use English. I think that for me personally, when I embark on a business English course, the needs analysis is pure gold. It is the jumping off point and the thing that carries me through my course. So more and more emphasis is being placed, of course, on the student-centered classroom. You will hear this in your general TEFL course too. The student-centered nature of our tasks and our classrooms and our lessons are all important, and for good reason. The students and their needs should be the focus, of course, of the classroom. And this should be reflected in the content and the style of the lessons and activities. In other words, it is vital to find out what your students need in order to plan appropriate and relevant lessons specifically for them. So, creating a needs analysis is the first step to finding out exactly what your students need. A needs analysis is a useful tool for finding out a whole range of information, which will help inform your decisions related to the class. And needs analysis can be carried out simply through a questionnaire, using written prompts for a written exercise, or a class discussion. However, it is done though, it needs to include certain information. So, some important questions to include in your needs analysis is, for example, do you ever talk on the telephone in English? Now, remember, these are questions that you're asking your students. You are about to embark on your business course to create your work scheme. So, these are questions that you would have to ask your students. So, the first thing, do you need to speak on the phone in English, or do you ever speak on the phone in English? What do you find challenging about learning and speaking English? Do you speak English more often with native or non native speakers? Do you often use English at work or in your leisure time? And then also questions like what, who, which, um, to understand the student's current, past, and future use of English skills. And then also which category best matches each question. Do you need to know English to use in meetings or conferences? Do you speak English to other colleagues? Have you studied English in the past? Tell me a little bit about that. Who do you usually speak to in English? So these are some questions to include in your needs analysis. And I'd say that if you missed a few of those, please rewatch this webinar at a later stage so you can actually make a note of some of those questions so that if you are looking to teach business English and to create your own work scheme, first and foremost, that needs analysis and what sort of questions to include. All right, and then also, since we're looking at getting started, remember to create a friendly atmosphere. Of course, you're going to be businesslike, but keep things fun and friendly. At the end of the day, yes, they're business people. Yes, they're students who are studying business, but they're students and they need to unwind a little bit in your class. They need to enjoy your lessons. It is a business course, so your presentation, of course, needs to be business-like, from what you say to what you wear, and also to how you behave. Also, business English students need motivation and encouragement. A group of managers, think about it, returning from a conference will need a trainer with high energy levels, possibly some humor. So increase your student talking time and try to reduce your teacher talking time. Make sure to include plenty of speaking time, conversation in every lesson, and at regular intervals during the lesson. If there is no space for communication in the class, a lot of these students may feel like, well, I've come here to learn to speak English and to communicate in English, but I'm not really getting the opportunity in my lessons. So make sure, I'll repeat, to include as much speaking time as possible during the lesson, and also make sure that there is a communicative aspect to every single lesson that you plan. Also, choose your materials wisely. So, authentic materials are vital in the business English class. They create authentic situations, and the content of your lesson becomes very relatable. However, your biggest resource is your students. Allow them to bring some of their own materials into the class. This could be leaflets or emails, PowerPoint presentations, or reports that they've written. You could also use their own materials to create worksheets. Do, however, remember that because business English students, and please take note, they're constantly missing lessons. Remember, business comes first. So asking them to bring in resources and then basing your entire lesson on this may backfire if some of them do not arrive. It could change the dynamics of your lesson, and you must be prepared for this. So think about it. If the student has to bring in something on Monday, and you're basing your whole lesson on this, but they don't arrive on Tuesday, or some other students arrive on Tuesday that were not here the week before, they might not have the notes, they might not have the resources, and they might not be prepared for the lessons. So it is good to ask them to bring their own materials, but make sure that your lesson is contained so that it doesn't really span over more than one lesson. Your students might get a little bit lost in the process. Also, the next is to be flexible and try to anticipate problems. I think as teachers, this is just an everyday thing. Business people can have very high expectations. They might ask for classes before they start work, during lunchtime, or at the end of a working day. And this means that you could end up working very long hours or hours that you're not quite prepared for, perhaps starting first thing in the morning and finishing the last lesson in the evening. In addition, as mentioned earlier, students may cancel at the last minute because of unforeseen problems. Perhaps an important call has come in or an urgent meeting has come up. So teachers need to accept that business comes first. To reduce the stress, it can be a good idea to negotiate a cancellation policy with the company in advance or with the student in advance. Ask them to make sure that they inform you about 24 to 48 hours in advance, for example. A further issue may be the number of people attending your class. It's not unusual to prepare for a group of 6 to 8 people and then have only 1 or 2 people arrive. So try to create activities that will work on a one-to-one basis too. So it sounds like a lot of preparation because it is. So I think that one of the most important things to remember is that when you are teaching business English, be prepared for anything. Of course, you're going to have your work scheme planned, you've done your needs analysis, but make sure that you've got a backup plan if any of these issues do arise. Right, so when it comes to planning your lessons, like any lesson, you need to plan. Your students know, I can guarantee you, based on experience, they know if you have not planned your lesson. So, new teachers should not dismiss the possibility of teaching an English for specific purposes class, an ESP class. You could be required to cover for an absent or sick colleague. And if you have come into ESL teaching from a business background, you could be teaching ESP sooner than you think. We should also dispel the myth that says you have to teach business studies when you teach a business English class. All you will be required to teach is the English for those specific purposes, ESP. You should prepare your ESP lesson plans essentially in the same way as you would prepare your ESL lesson plans, but you should take the following additional points into consideration. So, the ESP business students should already have a satisfactory command of English. Their primary objective will be to learn how to express themselves in English speaking business environments such as banking, insurance, finance, and accountancy. Second point, you should not attempt to prepare lesson plans based on run-of-the-mill grammar and vocabulary. You will have to base it on those aspects of English that have direct relevance to their needs and also practical application for specific business environments, like accounting, for example. So, with the business English class, planning a lesson purely based on tenses, for example, or a specific tense will fall flat. It needs to relate to something business related. Right, so the next point, if you're having serious difficulty in designing your lesson plans, you should think about talking to an ESP content specialist to assist you, or speak to teachers who have taught business English before. For me, when I started, not only teaching business English, but teaching English in general, the staff room, all the teachers were my mentors. I went to teachers, I listened to them, I picked their brains, I asked questions. And it doesn't matter if you ask questions being a novice teacher. Other teachers appreciate it. Your managers at your schools or the various platforms that you teach for appreciate an inquisitive teacher because it says to them you want to develop and you want to make your lessons better. So make sure, next one, that you research the particular area of business for which you will be teaching. I think it's key to know what you're talking about. So please do yourself a favor and research the area of business that you'll be teaching. Look online for some introductory texts or buy a few secondhand books to assist you in expressing yourself better. You'll feel so much more confident if you have this knowledge at your fingertips. The next point, your lesson plan should also take into account the characteristics of adult students. For example, make sure that the work is relevant and has specific and immediate applicable goals. Adults are very highly motivated. So within reason, your lesson plans should include more challenging work. Also take a look at the imagery you use. Make sure that it's adult-centered and not child-centered because these are business people, but yes, they're adults. And then finally, the final tip here, your weekly lesson plans should include practice in the use of English in the following topics. So, business correspondence, negotiations, specialized vocabulary, listening exercises like telephone and conferencing, and also small talk. So, these topics are an integral part of every business environment and really should be the core and the foundation of your work scheme. All right, so let's have a quick look at some of the advantages of teaching business English. For me personally, it's mostly a great thing. There are mostly just advantages, but we will also a little bit later on have a look at some of the challenges that we can face as teachers when teaching business. English. Right. So one of the advantages about of teaching business English is the flexibility it gives teachers because lessons can take place in different formats. For example, a teacher can have one-to-one classes, a company group where the teacher gives lessons at the company during working hours or immediately after work, and in school groups. So it gives the teacher a lot of variety and more flexibility. Another advantage here is that you as a teacher can learn a lot from your students. This for me is a wonderful exchange. I teach English, but I learn a lot from my students, and I also get a lot of content for upcoming lessons or for lessons with other students because you get a great idea of how the business world works if you don't already have a business background. And then there's skills development. So your skills and abilities as a teacher can be developed, seeing as your students might be required to perform tasks like giving presentations or using particular online applications. I tend to learn quite a lot from my students. And there's also language skills development for you. So your language knowledge can grow dramatically because you are required to function in a professional context. And one last point to mention is that the teacher does not have to deal with discipline issues that often. So students in your business English class are usually and relatively motivated and professional. And it's worth adding that your creativity might be developed when you need to design materials specifically for your students. So, those are fantastic advantages of business English. But let's also have a look at some of the challenges that we might face when teaching business English. Right. So this is a big one for me. You may have to teach in the evening after your students have had a long day at work. They come tired. And as a teacher, you have to compromise by using less challenging materials or even doing something entirely different. And then also think about the time. You might be tired after a long day, and then you've got to teach business English maybe in the evening or after a long day of teaching. This might also be a challenge for you as a teacher. And then, secondly, is attendance. This could be problematic because sometimes, as your students may have conferences or other business trips, or they may be pulled out of the lesson at any time when problems arise, particularly if you have your lessons in an in company setting. Students get called out of these lessons for whatever is happening out there, and it does sometimes throw you as a teacher a little bit. Of course, you need to roll with it and you need to be flexible, but this can be a challenge. Thirdly, if you're teaching in groups, mixed level classes can be an issue. Students can be mixed in terms of their language abilities, but also in terms of their age. In such cases, the teacher will have to balance things by challenging the stronger students to make sure that they don't get bored, but at the same time, making sure that you don't lose the weaker students. And then finally, with group classes, it could be problematic when you have managers and non managerial staff in the same group. This can sometimes influence and impact the group dynamic, maybe negatively. So, as the teacher, you'll have to keep your eye on this and make sure that you are proactive and that everyone is getting the best out of the lesson and enjoying it to the same degree. So these are all things to take into consideration, to balance, to watch for, to monitor, and to facilitate. But I think you can do it. All right, so we're also going to have a quick look at some career opportunities. I think that this is probably something that a lot of you are wondering about or wanting to ask about. So if you think about it, with 1.5 billion people, that's billion with a B, wanting to learn English right now, the career opportunities are, of course, endless. Once you have completed your TEFL course and perhaps the teaching business English course, yes, we have one, you'll be able to teach business English internationally and in a range of educational settings, such as online or corporate institutions or private one-to-one tuition. And as mentioned earlier, this gives you as a teacher a great opportunity for skills development as it takes you into all these various contexts of teaching. It's a really, really, really fantastic opportunity. Right, so as promised, I was also going to talk to you briefly about where to find resources. So first of all, you do not need to know terminology relating to business. Well, you do, but you can learn that. You also do not need to know exactly how a particular business or commerce in general works. Your business English learners will be so varied that there is no way one person can know everything there is to know. And when I say one person, no one teacher can know everything there is to know about all aspects of business English. So breathe in, breathe out, you'll be fine, even without a business background. So outside of our teaching business English course, In Company is the most popular course book for teaching business English. So, as mentioned earlier, the TEFL Academy, that's us. We have our own teaching business English course, 30 hours of business English teacher training. But then, in addition to that, In Company, that's the name, is the most popular course book for teaching business English. And the British Council, for example, endless resources, and also One Stop English offer great online resources for business English classes. And once you have the right resources, you can make sure that you're adequately prepared, enough to make a success of all your lessons and actually enjoy your lessons as you teach them. Right. So earlier I mentioned authentic materials. Now remember, authentic materials are materials that have not been created for educational purposes, specifically for English learning. So these are resources and materials that you would just pluck from out there and bring into your class. A few resources that we can look at: articles from the New York Times, for example, BBC Radio business reports, a company's annual report, a TED talk, the students' own emails in English, a Google pie chart, YouTube videos. There are just endless resources out there. I sometimes find that there's too much. And as a teacher, I really have to filter through these and choose what would work for my particular class. So if you think that there's not enough out there, please don't panic. There is enough. All right. Right. So we also mentioned earlier that there is a business English course offered by the TEFL Academy. So if you're already doing the TEFL course, there is, of course, the option to do one of our our additional, our top-up courses. So if you're watching this webinar, chances are you've already enrolled on our Teaching Business English course. If you have not yet done so, I'll tell you a little bit about it, and you might make up your mind to enroll ASAP. The online course for Business English consists of 3 mandatory units. Each unit is test assessed online, and there is an end of course assignment if you take the course separately from our main course. So if you're an external student and you just want to do the Business English course, you will have to do an assignment. If you've done the course as a top-up to your existing TEFL course, you do not need to do the assignment. In fact, you will not be asked to do the assignment. So the 3 units are as follows. We have an overview of teaching business English. There are techniques and activities for teaching business skills, and then also intercultural awareness, teaching receptive and productive skills. So the course is designed to train teachers and aspiring teachers how to teach business English. And, in our increasingly globalized world, English plays an important role. It is by far the most dominant language of business and fluency, and is essential for anyone seeking to join this global workforce. So international companies also often use English as a shared language to conduct business between countries where English is not the official language. We spoke about this earlier, for example, between Germany and China. And because of this, as mentioned earlier too, high demand of business English teachers. And the market, good news for us teachers, is likely to increase in the future. So we'll really look at how to give you the best in the business English course to teach you all the necessary skills. But I think something to remember before we wrap up and before I end the presentation part is that, of course, it is imperative that you do your homework. Do your homework before your students arrive. get to know the group before they arrive. Do a little bit of research, find out which department they're from, and then also make sure that you get to know their industry, their field as much as you can. Remember, I said to you earlier, you do not need to know all the terminology, but preparation is key. And the more you know beforehand, the more confident you'll feel during the lessons. The second point going forward is remember to go with the flow, but keep your eye on the aims of your lesson. So, business English students often, mark my words, see the business English lesson as a bit of an escape or a chance to exhale after a long day of business. Now, this is fine for them, but you've planned your lesson and you've got goals and you've got aims that you want to achieve. So while you can go with the flow, please allow some of this humor and relaxation and enjoyment and engagement in your lesson. But of course, yes, keep your eye on the aims and try to bring them back to these whenever you can. Something that helps me a lot as a teacher is to revise the aims of the lesson before and after, and with your class. So, what I tend to do is, and this is just an idea that you can use, don't use, I write my aims in the corner of my board, whether it's a physical classroom or whether it's an online lesson and I've got to use the screen. I write the aims somewhere on the screen or on the board so that they know what it is I want to achieve with them by the end of the day or the end of the lesson. And then we go over these before the lesson, and I'll say to them, by the end of this lesson, I would like for you to be able to do the following. And then once the lesson is over, revise the aims again and say, like, look, we've achieved this. And this was an aim at the beginning of the lesson. We've achieved it. And it gives your lesson that full circle feeling, but it also gives your students that feeling of, we've accomplished this today. And it's a fantastic feeling to wrap the lesson up with. And then also, something I've got to mention is to have boundaries. When it comes to your your students, remember I said to you, they're adults, and they absolutely want to invite you out. They extend social invitations. So do make sure that you are comfortable with what they're offering, but also that the company where you're working at or the school you're working for allows this. If this is not the case, then politely decline and wish them a great evening or a great afternoon. Show some interest, of course, and ask them about it the next day. Was the food good? Did you enjoy the atmosphere? But absolutely accept what you feel comfortable with or what is okay with either the school you're teaching for or the company you're teaching at, the platform you're working with. So do make sure that you know the ins and outs and do accept only what you feel comfortable with. So for me, to conclude, business is not boring. There is something new to learn every day as a teacher, and your students will walk away feeling enriched because of the English they've acquired, valued because of your preparation and your effort, and also more confident to conduct business in English. So I hope this webinar has helped you and given you the motivation to teach business English with confidence. I know that there's a lot of work that goes into preparing a business English work scheme, but it's so worth it. Once you start that program, knowing that every lesson is prepared, your materials are ready, and you don't have to scramble around last minute to throw things together, it's just such a satisfying feeling. So if you are thinking about doing our Teaching Business English course, don't hesitate, not even for a second. Enroll immediately after this webinar. It's immediate and you can get cracking straight away. If you are already doing our business course, enjoy it and remember to reach out if anything is unclear. Send us a ticket and we'll be more than happy to assist you. Right, so we've come to the end of my presentation and we're going to start Q&A. And I already see that some questions have come in. Um, Before we move on to Q&A, please just a reminder that all our webinars are available on the TEFL Academy YouTube channel. And if you've got any further questions, please remember, as mentioned earlier, you can absolutely send a ticket to tutor support, right? So I think, yeah, we've reached Q&A. And I see some questions have already come in. I will, of course, try to get to as many of them as I possibly can within the short space of time that we've got left. Let's see what we've got in here. All right, so I've got a comment more than a question. That's so reassuring. Thanks, it's so daunting. I know business English can be quite daunting, and I think for me it was too, because I kept thinking, well, I don't have a business background, I don't have a business degree. What am I going to do here? But I think that once you prepare your lessons and once you just focus on the target language you're wanting to teach your students, you'll be more than fine. All right, and also a hello to all the students that came in after we did our meet and greet. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. All right, so let's see. We've got another question here. I'm doing level 5, so is teaching business English included in detail? No, it is not. There are a few references to teaching business English in the general TEFL course, but business English, because it is an ESP, English for Specific Purposes course, it is definitely something that warrants its own course. And for that reason, we've created a 30-hour business English course. So if you're doing your level 5, Deepa, do check what your options are around the top-up course. It might be either that it is discounted or it's free. Do check up on that. Send a message to student services and they'll tell you what your options are, so that if you are interested in doing the business English course, it's an option waiting for you as soon as you finish your level 5 course. All right, so yeah, enjoy that. And then someone's kind of jumped in here and helped me answer the questions today. Fromans, thank you very much. It's an extra free course. Absolutely. So check if your package includes this as a free course or whether it's at a discounted rate. But either way, Deepa, you'll be able to access this course. So enjoy it. All right. I've got to put this on. What if I don't understand some business terms? Well, you know what? True story, it will happen. But remember, you're going to be, you've planned a lesson and you're about to teach specific, maybe terms in that lesson. My tip is to focus on just that. And if your students say, well, what is this and what is that? I've heard about this, I've heard about that. Say to them, right, we'll deal with that in the next lesson. And then write it down, because if you don't know, that helps you too. So then you write it down and you say to them, we'll deal with that in the next lesson. I don't want to confuse the situation. Let's just focus on the target language we're learning today. And there are 2 reasons for this, Tipsy Teletubby. One is that you might not know the answer. And 2, remember that you've possibly got students from other levels. So you've got maybe an intermediate student, you've got an upper intermediate student, maybe you have an advanced level student. So I think that just, unleashing terminology on these various levels might actually, do your students a disservice and confuse them. So my gold nugget here for you is to stick to just the target language that you're going to teach them and no more than that. If you know the term, of course you can tell them. If you don't know the term, tell them we'll be dealing with that in another lesson, and then quickly go and Google it in the break. Right, let's see. Yeah, a lot of you are asking about the cost of the business English course. Please just contact our student services department. They'll be able to send you the pricing, or just check on your profile whether you have access to a free top-up course or a discounted top-up course. So please contact student services and you'll be more than welcome to ask these questions and they'll give you all the information that you need. All right. We mentioned, this is a good question. Are there any other websites that you would recommend to research for lesson planning when teaching business English? I think that, there are so many websites out there that can help you with this, but those that I mentioned specifically, it was British Council. I'm trying to think back now. Um, I'll go back for you. Yeah, it was British Council, In Company, One Stop English. Those are great jumping off points and often linked to other websites, affiliate websites. I would say definitely start there. Of course, our course is best, but of course, you'll be looking for more resources on lesson planning. And some of these websites even have full-blown lesson plans that you can either access for free or subscribe to access. And these are fantastic because they're done for you. So if you are interested in those, I would say start with those that we mentioned and then see what other affiliates they offer. And then also have a look on our site. We've got blogs on business English where we also give lists of websites that you can use, websites that you can access, and they're great. They're so, so useful. All right. I'm doing Unit 1 at present. Welcome, newbie. So these 10 units in level 5, good enough to teach EFL in detail? Absolutely. Once you've done all your units on the TEFL course, you'll be more than fully equipped to go and teach English. However, as mentioned, if you are going to be teaching business English, I would say um, give the business English course a go, particularly if you have it for free and it's at your fingertips. If you've got to pay for it or you receive it at a discounted rate, you can wait a while and then do it at a later stage, but it's definitely something that I would say see it as an investment, particularly if you're going to be teaching business English. All right. So I like this question. I like all your questions, but this one I find particularly useful. Do you recommend completing the level 5 before beginning the business English course? Yes, I do. Because remember, in most cases, you'll be teaching general English first, and then at a later stage, you'll be perhaps you'll be given the opportunity to teach a business English class. And the reason for this is that business English students are normally a little bit higher in level, so the school you're working for might first want you to find your feet in a general English class and then move on to business English. So I would say approach your courses in the same way. Get your level 5 first, learn the fundamentals of teaching English before you study teaching business English. I hope that makes sense. All right. And then we've got a comment. Great advice on Googling terms and dealing with them later. Absolutely. What about some particular business course books like Market Leader? Yes, I use Market Leader. I find them useful, but I also find that authentic material really gives students that feeling of, I've achieved something that a native speaker would achieve by picking up a newspaper article from, a coffee table, or picking up some text off a website about a company profile of a website, specifically not created for English learners. So authentic material, I would say if you're going to be using a fantastic resource like you've suggested their Market Leader, I would say supplement that with a little bit of authentic material too, because business English students particularly appreciate that, because at the end of the day, they're going to be picking up authentic material outside. They're going to be sitting in a coffee shop reading an article. They're going to be talking about something they've seen online. So definitely, if you're going to be using something like Market Leader, supplement with some authentic material. All right, let's see. If you work as an independent teacher, are ESP lessons such as business English supposed to be more expensive than general English lessons? I'm going to give you the short answer, and that's yes. Of course, there are different platforms that maybe put them on equal footing, but I find in my experience, Business English calls for a higher rate because of all the preparation that goes into it. And also because by the time you're teaching business English, you've got a bit more experience also. So I would say absolutely. And if you look, once upon a tale, if you look at some of the platforms out there, where teachers can place their can advertise themselves and put their lessons and their profiles, just have a look at the price difference between a general English class and a business English class. There is a significant difference on some of these sites. Some of these sites marginal, some of them a significant difference. So yes, it absolutely shows that there's a difference between the two contexts. Yeah, that's and in my experience too. All right. Okay, so we've got a question here. How frequent should the lessons be for teaching business English? Um, so frequency would be up to the student you're working with if it's a one-to-one. Frequency would also maybe be up to the company if you're doing an in-company training course. So I would say sometimes business students can only do 1 to 2 lessons per week. It's very rare that a business English student can sit down with you for a lesson every single day. They have other stuff to do. So I would say 1 to 2 times per week if it's at an in-company situation. If it's one-to-one, it might also be 1 to 2 times a week. If it's at a school, like a language school, where business English is one of the many courses that they offer, okay, it might be an everyday situation, but this is a very particular scenario at a language school. In most cases, it's 1 to 2 times per week. All right. Okay, so interesting question here. Can it also be used for younger students doing school interviews? I would say maybe yes, but I think maybe business English, remember, you're going to be drawing up the work scheme. You are. So of course you can downplay the business and focus more on the interview skills in your course. So I would say yes, you could teach it to younger students, particularly if interview skills is your focus. But then I would say because you have the luxury of writing your own work scheme, you'll you'll be able to, as mentioned earlier, downplay business and really focus on those that those students would find particularly useful. All right. Um, Again, I think this kind of links into what I said earlier. Yeah, that's from Pacman Ku. I would say you can absolutely start teaching business English to students that are finishing high school. Remember, business English is more about at what level they can start learning business English. So your business English lessons are usually for students who already know a bit of English. So I would say level is more important here. But yes, if you've got students finishing high school, jumping straight into the job market, absolutely you can. Then, of course, again, you'd have to fine tune and tweak your work scheme so that it is more younger person centered and also more based on interview skills and understanding contracts and things like that. But I would absolutely say you can do that. I would find it useful. If I were a young person going straight into the job market, it would be an absolute asset for me too. Great question. And then Tipsy Teletubby says, your webinar on teaching beginners was extremely enjoyable and highly informative. I'm so happy to hear that because, again, like business English, teaching beginners can be quite daunting. So happy to hear that that was helpful for you. All right. So, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our webinar. But as usual, we do want you to give us a little bit of feedback. Tell us what you thought about this. And also, I think there's the opportunity for you to suggest other topics that you think might be useful. So I'm going to be putting the survey link into the chat right now, and I'll also be displaying the survey on the screen. Um, by the end of this webinar. But again, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for asking all these fantastic questions. And a big sorry if I did not get to all the questions that have come in. Of course, we've got this hour, it's limited, but we do not leave you there. So you can absolutely send your questions to tutor support, where myself and other tutors like me are waiting for them so we can answer your questions for you. All right, so we're not leaving you in the deep end. So please send us your questions if I did not get to them. Rewatch this webinar. It will be available shortly in a few days' time. And also, a Happy New Year to all of you. A happy 2024. I wish you all the best. And yeah, see you on the course. All right, so I'm going to be putting the survey on the screen too. And you're welcome. You're absolutely welcome. And yeah, see you next time, same place. And for those of you looking for previous webinars, please go onto our YouTube channel. If you can't find it, send us a message on tutor support and we'll send you the link so that you can find the webinar you're looking for. All right, a big thank you to all of you. Have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.